Hello, everyone. My name is Daichi Shimbo. I'm a clinician scientist and board-certified non-invasive cardiologist. I'm professor of medicine here at Columbia University, and at the American Heart Association, I'm vice chair of clinical programming in the Council of Hypertension. This year, I'm here to announce that Dr. Jackson Wright has received the Marvin Moser Clinical Hypertension Award. This award recognizes a qualified mid-career or senior hypertension clinician, their dedication and contributions to the treatment and care of patients with hypertension. This award was established to honor the memory of Dr. Marvin Moser, one of the leading giants in the field of hypertension, who also was the inaugural editor-in-chief of the Journal of Clinical Hypertension. Dr. Moser was a major leader in creating the entire field in making hypertension a central focus of clinical practice in the cardiovascular care, prevention, and treatment. So Dr. Jackson Wright was the recipient, and he's of course the most deserving of this award because he's well-known and very prolific physician scientist, and he's devoted his entire career to answering critical questions in the field of clinical hypertension. So Dr. Wright, tell the audience, how did you get into this field?
I might say that I had a somewhat invested interest in the field of hypertension. Everyone in my family growing up had hypertension or one of the complications of hypertension. And so that it was and for that matter, even during training, my blood pressure was on its way up. So again, I had a clear vested interest in this disorder.
You know, obviously, you take care of patients with hypertension or a risk for hypertension. So my question is, how did you decide to enter research? What were things that went through your mind?
Well, research was always the primary goal throughout my growing up years. I was always interested in research even before I became interested in medicine. My family had to, and I've told the story that my family had to survive several small explosions from chemistry sets while growing up. And so I began with an interest in research. And it wasn't actually until I was actually a PhD graduate student in pharmacology, and then decided to expand the research into human studies, and because of that was when I decided to also apply for medical school.
For the audience, obviously, I went through your resume, which was extremely long and dedicated to hypertension and clinical research. Could you give an audience sort of examples or instances of highlights in your career? I think they would be very interested in hearing about what is sort of the milestones in your mind.
Yeah. Well, again, my focus has always been on, because of who I am, obviously my focus has been on the study of hypertension in African American populations. And so that one of the first studies that I was that I participated in was the African American study of kidney disease, which evaluated the optimal blood pressure as well as the optimal drug therapy to slow the progression of hypertension kidney disease, a disease that disorder that is rampant within the African American community. It branched then into the hypertension in the prevention of cardiovascular disease. So that was the ALLHAT trial, the antihypertensive lipid lowering to prevent heart attack trial. 45,000 patients, relatively large, but it also had 35%, 15,000 African American patients that were recruited throughout the U.S., Canada, and Caribbean. And most recently, the Sprint trial I was fortunate enough to be a part of. Obviously, in all of those studies, I was not the only person or the only investigator. I was a part of a very large group of renowned investigators that joined me in participating, joined me in leading those studies. Not to mention the vast number of staff who will probably deserve even more the credit than we as investigators enjoy.
That's fantastic. Nice summary of your work. And of course, I know that you've left out a lot of important accomplishments.
I did. I did not mention the Sprint trial, which we just was recently reported with the looking at the systolic blood pressure of 120 compared to the usually recommended less than 140, not to mention the guidelines existing at the time that Sprint was underway, recommended systolic blood pressure of target of 150 in most hypertensives, which included those over age 60.
Yeah. So Dr. Wright, I have a question for you. You know, we've gone through COVID pandemic. You know, here in New York City, it's almost resolved. It's still in the background, but you know, we've gone through, and other states are having you know, difficulty. And you know, you put on top of that sort of the fact that control rates for hypertension have stagnated, you know, over the past few years. So my question to you is, where do you think the field's going? I mean, there's a lot to do here.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, I think we have the answers of can we do we have the medications in order to control hypertension? Yes, we do. We now know the optimal blood pressure to prevent the complications of hypertension. We know that. We have the medications now are in fact generic, and so are relatively inexpensive. So that bottom line is we now know how to treat hypertension. There should not be an issue in terms of, and now the major challenge is to achieve the blood pressure targets, use the medications that we know work in order to control the disease. And we know that it in fact is effective in multiple populations, including African Americans, where previously we had so little data.
So I have one final question for you, Dr. Wright. So for me, what gets me up in the morning and come to work is early stage investigators, people I mentee, and I know that you feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice do you have for early career investigators that are interested in preventive cardiology, specifically in hypertension?
Yeah. Like you, Daichi, the mentoring and developing early stage investigators, it's been a major focus of both of our lives. And you have look at the list of people that you have developed. And I think that's the proudest part of my career is the fact that being able to not only encourage, but mentor in early stage investigators. And I think for those who are interested in academic career, the identifying an active research group and identifying individuals who are interested in developing your careers and in fact sponsoring your careers, I think is extremely important. And so that the homework involves identifying those individuals as much as learning your craft and your discipline. So that to early stage investigators, identify folk, identify investigator in research groups that are doing what you want to achieve, and make those contacts at places like the Hypertension Council, and other research or academic meetings such as that.
No, that's fantastic. So yeah, it makes sense. You want to align them to their interests so that they don't feel like it's just work. It's a passion. It's something they want to do. So look, I'll wrap it up. I just wanted to say a hearty congratulations to you, Dr. Wright. Well deserved. And I look forward to more work from you.
And thank you. And it certainly is an honor to have received this award from the Hypertension Council, and especially the award named in honor of Marvin Moser, Dr. Marvin Moser, who was certainly one of my idols, colleagues, and I consider a friend, and has made major contributions to this field and set the example for the appreciation of the need for data in order to make the treatment decisions that we need to make. So
Fantastic.
thank you.
Thanks again.